Many folks who've done a great job of accumulating a nice pile of savings to fund their retirement accidentally head into a tax trap without even knowing it. I call it the post-retirement tax valley. A few years of exceptionally low taxes followed by a sudden tax hike that could catch you off guard. And if you're not careful or intentional, this can cost you tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars that you absolutely could have avoided. So in this video, we'll walk through a case study to show you how this happens, how you can recognize it in your situation, and then what steps you can take to actually avoid it and keep more retirement money in your pocket. So let's first start with what is this post-retirement tax planning valley. So this phenomena occurs when folks first retire, typically in the first few years of retirement. Often these folks are savers, and in the years leading up to this date, they've kind of funded up all of their kind of necessary accounts, right? Typically their RRSPs are maxed, their TFSAs are full, and then whatever's left is sitting in a non-registered account. But by being kind of default savers, they've just also felt more comfortable building up what was, in their mind, an emergency fund that has grown over the years, kind of leading up to retirement, to become a really nice stash of cash savings, kind of just sitting at the bank, sitting in cash. And so because these are early retirees, they're often doing this around the age maybe 58 or 60 years old. And then what inevitably happens in absence of a larger plan is that they retire, they pull the plug on work, and then they fund a modest retirement income by purely living off of that savings. So as a result, for a few years, their taxable income is really, really low, which often seems great at first. But this low tax period creates a false sense of security. After a few years, when those savings are eventually spent down, they inevitably kind of get around to turning on their actual pension income streams. And those are often coming from tax-deferred accounts like their RSPs, their pensions, eventually CPP, and OAS, say at maybe age 65. And that's where the valley turns into a really steep hill, with taxes suddenly rising as their income shoots back up. So let's take a look at a quick case here, just so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. So let me introduce you to Tim and Tam. Tim and Tam live here in BC. Their home is worth about $1 million. And then they've got savings in their RRSPs, about $825,000. Their TFSA, they've got about $250,000 between the two of them. And then they have cash savings. Again, they are savers by default of $900,000. Sitting aside there to fund their retirement. So in total, just shy of $2 million to make all of this happen. These folks figured they needed about $10,000 a month to live on, so about $120,000 a year of net after-tax spending money. And so this was going to be their plan as they had thought it out to be. They were going to live off of that non-registered cash for a number of years until they turned on those pension sources, and then they were going to turn on the pension sources and take out the draws from their RSPs at that time. I mean, the plan fundamentally works. There is enough assets here to fund the rest of their life. But this is the problem. In this chart here, I've turned off all of the other kind of bells and whistles, and I'm just isolating for what we would expect their annual tax bill to be in each year of their retirement. And we can see now that tax valley that I'm talking about. We've got a number of years here of very low taxable income. But then once we turn on all of those other pension sources, we see that tax rate steps all the way up to maybe $15,000 a year or so, and continuing on for the rest of their life. And while it feels great to have no tax for a number of years, there surely must be a better way to do this. If we add up the lifetime amount of personal tax Tim and Tam are expected to pay, it's going to be about $451,200 over the rest of their lifetime. Then, at the end, there would also be potentially estate taxes that would be due on the second of them to pass. The total of that tax would be about $134,563. So that's the amount of tax that their current base case plan would estimate them paying over the rest of their life. By the way, if we haven't ever met, my name is Steve Willems. I'm a practicing certified financial planner and wealth advisor with the Willems Wealth Planning Group out here in BC. We started this channel to help you plan for your own retirement, helping you think about how to plan and arrange your investments, your income streams, and ideally pay less tax along the way. So by this point, it should be pretty clear what some of the problems with this setup might actually be, but let's just boil it down to the two big issues just so that we're all on the same page. And number one, this presents an unexpected tax burden. Most people who do this, they're not actually thinking about the impact impact of this decision 5 years down the road. For better or for worse, as a professional planner, I can't think about anything but the future impacts of the decisions that we make today. Retirees often aren't prepared for this tax hit. And so not only are you potentially moving up to a higher marginal tax bracket, it can also affect future eligibility for GIS, OAS, clawback, qualification for certain government-sponsored healthcare programs, that kind of thing. And second, this also presents a pretty significant missed opportunity for tax-efficient drawdown strategies. These years of low taxable income typically then are wasted when they could have been doing other things to actually create some taxable income that could have them pay less tax over the rest of their lifetime. So let's switch gears then. What can you actually do about this? How can you actually make sure that you don't land kind of yourself in this kind of post-retirement tax planning valley? Well, there's a few ideas. First, you got to just start with a plan. Predictable, right? A planner says you need to have a plan. It's like a lawyer saying you need a will, or a dentist saying you need to floss more, or your GP saying you need to lay off of that third slice of peach pie. But hear me out. If you're, say, 2 years out from retirement, you think you've got enough saved, you really need to think about this decumulation strategy at that point. Because at that point, you don't actually just need a retirement projection in the traditional sense, right? The testing of, do I have enough? What you need is a strategic drawdown plan, something that looks like what we show in this channel. That way, instead of waiting until you're forced to take taxable income out at a higher tax rate, you can actually start creating taxable income before perhaps even you need it. And that will then spread out a smaller tax burden over several years and keep you from jumping up to a higher tax bracket down the road. Now, what do I mean by creating taxable income? Because remember, in this case, this couple had enough cash on hand to live the life that they wanted. So it's important to note, here I'm talking about taxable income and not cash flow. Right? These two things are often confused, and they can serve very different purposes and have different impacts on your situation. So cash flow is the money that you've got available to spend in retirement. It can come from a bunch of different sources, right? RIF withdrawals will be taxable. Pensions will be taxable. CPP and OAS will be taxable. TFSA withdrawals will not be taxable. Dividends in non-registered accounts will be partially taxable. Net rental income will be taxable. Proceeds from selling stuff that's gone up, stocks or real estate, partially taxable, subject to capital gains. You get the drift. So the taxable income then is the amount of money that the government considers for tax purposes, the amount that the government sees and requires that you pay tax on. You can easily have cash flow from sources that don't count as taxable income. And again, to be clear here, that's exactly how this tax planning valley occurs. So back to our case. What can you do to create taxable income if you're expecting that post-retirement tax planning valley is coming your way? Well, 4 quick ideas. Number 1, you can crystallize capital gains. So if you hold investments in your taxable non-registered accounts, you can sell those positions to create capital gains. You may do this to either rebalance your portfolio or outright dispose of an underperforming security or maybe an expensive mutual fund. Now, the perk here is that you can create some taxable income while potentially staying in a lower tax bracket. This is also going to apply to real estate. Again, all else equal, if you have the choice to sell a piece of property in a tax valley or a tax peak, you're going to want to sell it in the valley. So ideally, in the context of your larger plan, you can kind of contemplate the timing of when might be an opportune time to sell and crystallize some of those gains. And number 2, you can initiate spousal RSP withdrawals. Now, these accounts are one of the best tools for income splitting in early retirement specifically. So just to remember, spousal RSP contributions gave you, let's say, the RSP deduction when that money went into that account, but will have the withdrawal amount taxed in your spouse's name, assuming it's been 3 years since that last contribution. Again, you don't need to actually be spending these dollars. They can just be kind of recycled and reinvested back into your after-tax non-registered or your brokerage account. Pretty common exercise to see a higher income spouse contribute to a non-working partner's spousal RSP, and then in the early years of retirement, you'll equalize your taxable income between the partners and kind of draw down the spousal RSP to use up all that low rate tax that otherwise might go unused. Now, the third idea, of course, you just have the option of plain old RIF withdrawals too, right? Many don't know, but you don't have to convert your entire RSP to a RIF at one time. You can do a partial conversion. So by converting a smaller slice of your RSP, you can trigger some extra T4 RIF income during those low income years, while still also reducing the risk of kind of a large minimum withdrawals, kind of pushing you into higher tax brackets later on when, maybe you're in your 70s. Now, fourth, if you're a business owner, you can always fill this bridge, this tax valley, by paying out dividends from your company. Now, eligible dividends here are going to be especially favorable due to the dividend tax credit, which will create the taxable income, but still keep the tax bill down nice and low. Admittedly, folks with private corporations tend to not have piles of personal cash on hand, as that tends to be retained inside their businesses, but nonetheless, this could be an option. So those would be the 4 quick ways that you could potentially look at creating some extra taxable income without you needing to work an extra shift or do anything that actually requires actual work, just kind of planning moves that will create better outcomes for your retirement. So let's hop back into the case to see how this might look for Tim and Tam. You can see that after we created some taxable income in this early retirement period, that post-retirement tax planning valley, there's still a noticeable change down here, obviously from their employment years, and we're all good with that. We just don't want to have this herky-jerky tax experience kind of way up and way down and way up. We want to smooth this out. That's the goal, right? And again, the right way to do this is through kind of this broader lens so that you can kind of see the ripple effects of some of these single decisions. And the really cool thing here when we actually run the numbers is that not only is that tax planning valley gone completely, the estimate of how much tax they'll have to pay later on in life is materially lower than even what it was in the early phases of their retirement. And again, this is going to be at a time when they're going to want to have low taxable income to open up more doors for perhaps different types of assisted living arrangements or different types of healthcare programs that might be income tested. And like with the original plan, these numbers still work. We haven't actually changed how much spending they're making. We're just changing where their income is coming from. And the crazy thing is that when we look at kind of a before and after of with the planning or without the planning, the single decision had a 6-figure consequence for them in 2 different ways. Number one, their lifetime personal tax estimate was cut down by $113,694. That's a 6-figure cut in their personal tax that they would have otherwise had to pay over the course of their life. And on top of that, not only did they pay less tax during their lifetimes, their estate tax bill is also going to be materially lower than had they not done this approach at all. Their estimated tax on their estate, if the second of them makes it to age 95, is now $134,563 lower to a $0 tax bill at their age 95. So between these 2 things, almost a $250,000 tax benefit purely by changing a single variable and dealing with that tax planning valley that is so common in so many retirement plans. If you haven't done this kind of work yourself for your own retirement plan and you're curious about what that might look like for your situation, or if you in fact have a tax planning valley, or what the numbers might look like for you, every week we set aside a couple of times to chat with people who have these types of questions and help them figure out ways to get answers to those questions. If you'd like to take advantage of that, I'll put a link in the description below for you to grab a time on the calendar. Anyway, I hope that's helpful. We'll be aiming to do more of these kind of case study type videos in the weeks ahead. So tap that like button if you like seeing these kinds of case studies broken out like this. And just be sure to subscribe so you can keep tabs as we keep dropping these kinds of retirement planning tip videos. Thanks as always for watching. I'll see you in the next video.